Today I'm chatting with Dan Palyo from Rotoballer, taking a look at what his life is like as a fantasy basketball analyst and just a sports analyst. Let's go. Balls deep.
I could bet all of the riches that I ever had.
Hello, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Balls Deep Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Fantasy Basketball International. FBIbasketball.com is the website. I'm at Twitter at AdamKing91, hosting these shows. Go and check out all of our content. This will be the off season when this is being released, but as you know, we have a ton of Dynasty stuff coming out. We're rolling through our analyst interviews today. This is the sixth episode, I think, fifth or sixth episode. I'm chatting with Dan Palyo from Rotoballer. Dan, how are you, good sir?
I am great. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here and talk some hoops, reflect back on the season a little bit, and excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. First one, and I know the answer because I've looked. Well, I mean, it's pretty easy to tell, but being a 90s basketball fan like myself, the Thunder Dan is obviously a Dan Marley reference.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of I guess our younger folks and listeners may not be as well versed in the Dan Marley, the greatness that was Dan Marley. But yeah, my first name being Dan, it kind of just was a nickname that stuck when I was younger and playing sports and stuff, and just kind of stuck with me. And I ended up kind of rolling with it when I started doing fantasy content. And I just try to stick out, have something different, unique about me. And I love Dan Marley, huge fan.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's. I mean, to me, it was pretty obvious. And then having a look at your Twitter profile, there's pictures of Dan Marley. So were you a Phoenix fan or a Dan Marley fan?
No, more of a Dan Marley fan. Actually, I'm a Cleveland Cavs fan, and I would say long suffering, but things are pretty good lately. So growing up in that era, I was actually watching the teams of Larry Nance and Mark Price, Craig Elo, Hot Rod Williams, you name it, Brad Daugherty. Those were my Cleveland teams growing up. And then, of course, they couldn't get over the hump, couldn't beat Jordan. And then there was like the 2000s, which was just ugly for Cleveland for a long time. And LeBron came back. And then LeBron left again. And now, we're on the second whole wave of rebuild in Cleveland. But so just more of a Dan Marley fan and a huge just 90s NBA fan. Like, I think it was the golden age to me. Golden age of basketball in the 90s. Just so many great players. Just watching as a kid, loving the sport.
Yeah, no, I think I have to agree that the 90s was the best era for me as well. Coincides with Michael Jordan, which it did for a lot of people here in Australia. I've said to a few of the guys that I've chatted with, our exposure to the NBA was pretty limited in the 90s. We were lucky to get one game a week.
Oh, wow.
And it was all basketball cards and magazines, newspapers with box scores, that sort of thing. So we were it was almost dictated to us that we had to like Jordan because he was the guy. But yeah, I do remember watching all of the those playoff games with the Suns and the Bulls, and Dan Marley was actually one of my mates. He just a couple of months ago, he just bought an authentic 90s Dan Marley Suns jersey. So one of his favorite players as well.
Love that.
I've sent you a few questions. We've been going through these questions with all the analysts, but really we see where the conversation takes us. So in terms of fantasy basketball writing, sports writing, for you, first question we normally go through is this a full-time thing for you, or is this something that you do sort of outside of another day job?
Yeah, no, it's not full time, unfortunately. It's taken on more and more of my time over the course of the last 5 years, where it's become I guess, a bit of a obsession or full time second job. Um, but no, I by day I'm a teacher, a high school teacher.
Okay.
Um, I used to be a coach. I used to be very much into coaching, some football, basketball, and then when I had kids and I no longer coached, I've always been a big stat guy and a huge, hugely into fantasy and stats, and started to I just dabble with the idea of writing some blogs and content and for different, sites and stuff, and then it just kind of snowballed from there to where I was, writing about NBA DFS every day, and then baseball, and then football, and then just kind of like now it's year round. There's literally no days off. Um, just kind of cover all the three big sports at least,
Yeah.
and yeah, man, it just kind of happened organically. Like I never really planned on it being that's this big of a chunk of what I do, but I'm happy to be able to have this much carved out kind of a niche in the space. So
Yeah, and it's like, I know for me and for a lot of the guys that I'm talking with, we're basketball only, so we've actually got a bit of downtime coming up in the next 3 months, whatever it is. It doesn't sound like you have that downtime as much, because you're sort of transitioning from one sport to the next, and
yeah,
as we know, the three major sports are basically run 365 days a year if you
yeah,
bunch them together. So you must have a pretty forgiving, understanding family as a lot of us do, to allow us to do this kind of work outside of having another job.
yeah,
For me, it's a lot of night times, early mornings like this.
yep.
Um, so I guess, I mean, you've said you've got kids. Um, you've sort of from, I don't know your exact age, but it sounds like you're sort of from my era, roughly
Well,
speaking.
yeah,
So you've got some kids. So how old are your kids now?
10
Are
and
they
4. I got 10-year
okay?
old, 4-year-old.
Okay, so a bit of a gap.
Yeah, a bit of a gap.
Yep. Um, yeah, mine are almost 13 and 16, so a little bit older, and
Yeah,
but a little more sort of happy to look after themselves in the morning,
independent.
which is
Yeah,
nice. Yeah, a bit independent. So outside of fantasy and outside of teaching, obviously you probably do spend a lot of time with your family, as much time as you can. But any other hobbies, any interests, anything you like doing
yeah,
specifically?
sure. I mean, I don't get to do it as much as I like to, but I like big outdoorsman. I like to go fishing. I'm not a hunter per se, but I like to get outside, do some hiking, fishing. Um, I'm here in Pennsylvania, so we have a lot of different like Appalachian Trail state parks. There's no shortage of opportunities to get out and enjoy nature. So I have to force myself to to get back to doing that as much as I used to do when I had more free time available. Um, I don't know, man. I mean, music, like I used to mess around with some guys in a band, play get some guitar, some
I,
drums, but that kind of stuff is just nowadays. It's just when I have a free minute, I'm messing around on it. But I just don't haven't have the time to do anything serious musically other than just kind of. I sometimes bring my guitar in and I goof around with my students and whatnot, or just something for fun. But I do love music, listening to music. I used to write some music and stuff, but anymore it's really just a fun little aside. I can't really invest much time into that
yeah.
with everything else going on. So
Yeah, no, that's understandable. See where you're coming from there. And having a look, and I remember when this happened, having a look on your Twitter profile, you were lucky enough to win Basketball Writer of the Year last year, but for the
yeah,
year before, I think it was, so
right,
2021.
yeah,
That must have been pretty exciting, I would imagine.
yeah. It
How,
was thrilled. I mean, it was very much lucky. I will. I mean, I don't want to sound like overly like self-deprecating, but it was not something I ever expected to win.
hmm,
He was nominated with like guys like Aaron Brewski and some other guys who are like industry standards. But I was very like humbled and flattered by it. I was happy to win. It did open up some more opportunities for me, and I was able to kind of, I guess kind of meet some more people in the industry like yourself and others, and get invited to some industry leagues and things, and kind of, dip my toe into, I guess, of the three sports that I cover, like, basketball is a sport where, there are fewer content creators. Football is an area that is flooded with probably five
All right.
times as
Okay.
many content
Yeah.
creators. So basketball is a place where, there is more, I think, more room for growth and opportunity. And it's something that I love. I play basketball. I still play occasionally, pick up basketball, watch
Yep.
basketball, follow it. I've really enjoyed, getting into like Dynasty finally a little bit with, like your buddy Matt Lawson does some great stuff
Yep.
with Dynasty, and was in the 30-team Dynasty League with some guys this year, and actually got to the semifinals, which was cool. So I mean, it's winning that award kind of told for me was it was definitely a surprise, and it was exciting, but it kind of got me to lean in a little more into the basketball
Yeah.
community. I associate more with basketball and baseball guys, and football is just something that I cover because as a kind of DFS and betting personality, like there's just no way you can avoid football season, and football just dominates here. So if you want to maintain relevance in that space, then you can't just put your head in the sand and pretend that American football doesn't exist. You just kind of have to do it. I always tell everybody, they're always surprised that it's my least favorite of the three because people here go crazy for it. But I just think basketball and baseball, as from fantasy perspective, requires so much more work and skill to win a season than fantasy football. And maybe that's a hot take. I don't know. But yeah. Anyways, I was happy to be included in the basketball community a little more after winning the award. And I'm going to continue to try to lean into it as much as possible.
Yeah, no, I think the football isn't something that I'm big into. It's not a sport that's it's played over here, but it's nothing like it is over there. We have our own brand of football, but talking with analysts both on this show and just on Twitter and going back and forth and getting to know people, I do get a bit of sort of grasp how big fantasy football is over there. And I'm halfway through watching The League at the moment, the TV show, which, to do a TV show based on fantasy football that runs for more than sort of one season. I think it goes for 6 or 7.
And it was hugely successful, right? Hugely successful.
Yeah. And so it's, I can understand how big it is, and quite a few people, I think, in the fantasy basketball space, their entry point was actually coming in through fantasy football and then discovering fantasy basketball that way. So,
right.
So no, that's sort of not surprising at all. So, you don't have much free time, which I think we've sort of covered that, and much the same as me. I really personally like movies, TV. Are you sort of a movie guy? Do you get to the movies? Do you watch TV shows? And what are your favorite ones? This is more a personal question.
All the movies, that's okay. All the movies I end up watching usually become Disney movies because my kids run the TV. But the few hours of the day that they're in bed that we get a chance to watch, like shows on Netflix or Hulu or something. We've gotten away from going out to the movies and stuff. Maybe it had to do with COVID and all that stuff. But we do enjoy. It feels like we've moved into like just television shows. Like so many shows on TV are like movie quality, anyways. Or you get into these long seasons and it's like watching a movie, anyways. But we try to watch all the big stuff. Like I love Stranger Things on Netflix. All the big stuff. Trying to get caught up on some of these series that we're behind on. It's just a tough out because, like you, I know you're up at the crack of dawn, not even there, and I'm up. When you messaged me this morning, it was last night there. I'm up at 5 a.m. doing stuff. So by it comes 9, 10 o'clock, like I'm tired, man. Like I wish I could stay up another 2 hours and watch a bunch of shows, but it's like if I don't get to bed, I'm not going to be able to crawl out of bed and do content for a few hours before I go to the day job. And so, anyways, it maybe on the weekends some movies and stuff. But
yeah. No, it is hard, and I think I know for me, that's part of the reason I look forward to this off season coming up, because that's when I can catch up on a lot of shows and things. Whereas for you, as you've said, that basketball's almost done, but you're transitioning now into baseball.
Yeah.
So you don't get that time. Look, I'm much the same as you. I'm full, not at 5. I'm not up that early, but 6-ish, I'm sort of awake. And I'm just someone that doesn't need a lot of sleep, so I don't go to bed till midnight most nights. So
Gotcha.
I can get by on 6 hours sleep, which does allow me to. And as I've said, I mean, my kids are a bit older, so I don't need to entertain them with a Disney movie or anything like that. They're happy to entertain themselves a little bit more. Although, in saying that, a lot of Disney movies I think a lot of them nowadays have an adult element to them.
Oh
anyway.
yeah, right.
So yeah, I'm happy to sit down and watch a Disney movie. So I mean, in terms of, I sort of chat with people about other sports. They like you just like sport, obviously.
Oh my gosh, just sports, man. Like, can't get enough of it. There's certain things I've tried and can't get quite into, like soccer. I know that's not super popular with the international crowd. I can't really get into it. I used to love college athletics here, and college football and college basketball, like in my 20s when I wasn't doing content, loved that stuff, following my alma mater, Penn State. But here's what's happened is that I've gotten so into the pro game because of content and because of fantasy that I'd find it hard to keep up and follow with the college game, which is sometimes tough because, you almost have to, if you're for these sports, with knowing prospects, knowing guys coming out, rookies. So that's a little bit of a blind spot, which is why I really like reading some of Matt's content at FBI, just because it keeps me up with the college guys. And I really have enjoyed watching the tournament this year. I don't do brackets anymore. I don't really bet on the tournament much. I just really try to watch it and enjoy it and scout some of the players coming up from a sheer sports perspective, because I find myself watching so many other sports with money invested or with, leagues invested, and you're rooting for stats and you're not always rooting for, teams and outcome, So I've been trying to enjoy some basketball just for the sake of basketball without, are my player props going to hit? Oh my guys, how am I doing in my semifinal matchup? Tracking all these things, how we get with NBA, just because I'm DFS every night, props every night, and then in leagues too, on top of everything else. So
yeah, I know for me it's, and I think this is more just a weird thing that I do, but I always feel like if I'm watching an NBA game and I've got guys on my fantasy squad playing, I always feel as though if I actually watch them, they play worse. So I don't watch them. And because I've got so many teams with so many players, it's hard to find a game where I haven't got someone playing. And so I actually enjoy this time of the year more, because I feel better and more comfortable just watching the basketball for what it is, and not stat hunting and sort of watching and, that's a turnover that's going to cost me, or the missed free throw, which annoys me. So maybe that's just more me than a fantasy thing. But
that's why the playoffs are great too. Like the playoffs coming up, like your leagues are over and maybe you're betting or playing DFS or something, but like for the most part, playoffs, you can just sit back and like watch really good basketball.
Yeah, and I'm much the same as you as well with the college thing. Like I read Matt's stuff. I love Matt's stuff, and it's, our exposure to college basketball isn't as big as the NBA over here. You can still watch it, but I've been watching the tournament, most of it, and I mean we do see a lot of prospects now coming from overseas as well, and it's hard to obviously watch. Well, Wembanyama we can watch because the NBA has been streaming all of his games, but that's not a usual thing. So on Wembanyama, looking ahead to next season, I've had a pretty varied sort of range of responses to this question, but I guess it's almost a two-part question. So if we were doing a fantasy draft, say tomorrow, and obviously there's a lot to happen between now and draft season, but where would you be comfortable drafting Wembanyama or in a league that you're in, and B, if we were to look at his ADP come the start of the season, where do you think his ADP will be?
So great question. So in these industry leagues and stuff, he's going to be like impossible to get, like, because everyone, like, it's always the trendy guys and the guys who are the huge hype guys always go earlier and earlier in these industry leagues. I mean, if you're playing in a typical home, people call them a home league with your friends, buddies, public league, boy, I'm trying to peg it down and I'm struggling. I mean, is he going to make it through the first round? Can you get him at the end of the first round, early second round? Or is the hype going to be such that he's going to go off the board after, once the top, Giannis, Jokic, the top 5 or 6 guys clear, or is someone going to reach for him at the end of the middle or the end of the first round? Oh man, I can see it happening, right? I think people think he has that skill set, and even if he's not polished or, by any means like, totally NBA ready, that he's just going to fall into stats, right? Like as far as 9-cat goes, like he's just going to fall into stats, even if he's not, a finished product by any means. Like whoever drafts him is going to play him and develop him. So it's not a question with minutes, right? I think he's going to get enough minutes and he's going to be productive enough that people are, even in just redraft formats, are going to want him early enough that they maybe spend I don't know, late first round, early second round pick. That's my ballpark guess. I don't know.
Yeah, look, I'm with you. I think that's where he will go. I think a few analysts that I've spoken with already are sort of saying, I'd be comfortable taking him in the third round, potentially the fourth round. And I think
in a perfect world,
in a perfect world, yes, absolutely. But I'm with you that I just think the hype and the skill set and how unique a player he is, that I could see him going. I've done my ranks already for next season, because why not? And he isn't in my first round. He's not in my top 12. But I could see people sort of pairing him with someone like a Halliburton or a Tatum, like someone who's a fairly surefire thing. Like this guy is relatively healthy, plays 70 games, 72 games, across the board stats, and then going, and now I'm willing to take a bit of a flyer on Wembanyama at say pick 15 or something.
I mean, that's an appealing strategy you just laid out, like taking a really good young player or a solid guy at the end of round 1, and then on the turn coming back, or whatever. Like I think in that second round, everyone's going to be looking at each other like, when's he going to go? I have a feeling he's going to go. I agree with you that third or fourth round will be rational, but I don't think there's going to be any rational way to approach it. The hype is just going to be so much.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of where he lands, so whoever drafts him, do you? I mean, there's obviously a few teams that have got a higher percentage of getting him in the draft. Is there a particular landing spot that you would prefer to see him next season?
I haven't really thought about that too much. I mean, I think some people are nervous that he does go to the Spurs or ends up in the Spurs, and that they baby him. I don't know what you would say. They handle him with kid gloves. Like Pop has a reputation for not wanting to rush guys along, and I think that would be, like, from a fantasy perspective, I thought something that would make people nervous, that they would maybe only play him 25 minutes or some kind of minutes cap or something with him where he's going to have it, not be able to hit his ceiling. But outside of that, I mean, whoever drafts him is going to build around him and feature him and make him the focal point. So I can't imagine that there's really a bad necessarily landing spot for him, or or actually a good landing. It's probably all things being held equal. it's really about minutes, right? For fantasy and opportunity. So
yeah, and I think that the question is almost, I guess, if you're looking at that question with a fantasy hat on or with a reality hat, because I think as you've said, from a fantasy perspective, I'm not sure the Spurs would be the best fit because they'll be cautious with him. They'll bring him along slowly. Whereas a stupid team like the Rockets or the Pistons, they could just roll him out there for 35 minutes, which could end one of two ways, really.
Right.
But I think from a real life perspective, the Spurs are probably the best landing spot in terms of his development. Like I think if he goes there, that they know how to do it. Whereas again, with two not so smart teams like the Rockets or the Pistons, who knows what their development sort of plan would be for him, because it doesn't appear they have one really.
No, I agree with you. Pop has a lot of experience with international players. As far as, his development, that would be great. Maybe there's a happy medium in there somewhere. Maybe there's a team where he goes where you can do a little bit of both, like, not throw him to the wolves entirely, but also not entirely hold him back. There's got to be a happy medium in there somewhere where you play him 28 or 30 minutes a night or something. But you're right. Some of these organizations that are continually bad are just dumpster fires. Charlotte is an interesting team. Like if he ended up going there, like that, they already have some talent. LaMelo there. I mean, I don't know if that's even very probable of that happening, but I mean, there's other teams where if he landed would be really interesting real quick,
Yeah, no, Hornets and Magic. I'd love either of those teams to get him. I know their chances aren't as high, but yeah, you never know. You never know what's going to happen. So I actually had an interesting chat with Matt Smith last night about whether we would take Wembanyama or Jaren Jackson first in drafts next season. He was Wembanyama, I was Jaren Jackson. So
I mean, I'm torn because I like Jaren Jackson a lot, but I don't know if he has the ceiling of Wembanyama in terms of his ability to score the ball and just all the different things he can do offensively.
Yeah. And I think Porzingis sort of comes into that discussion as well a little bit. Who would you like? He's always been an injury guy, but he's been pretty healthy this year.
This year. Right.
So, another interesting sort of conundrum there.
He's basically like a combination of both those guys. He could do a little bit of both. He's like if you put those guys together, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Cool. So, look, that sort of ticks off all the boxes on my list. So that will probably wrap it up there. We're at 28 minutes. So I said half an hour, so I'm pretty close with my timing. So before we, jump off, by the time this is running, the basketball stuff will be done, but you'll be doing some baseball stuff. Tell people where they can find you and sort of what you've got coming up in the next few months.
Well, definitely check me out on Twitter at ThunderDanDFS. I will be covering the NBA playoffs for betting purposes and making some series predictions. Betting individual games and some props and things. I'll continue to cover the NBA throughout the playoffs. And then, I have my own betting Substack that people could check out. It's like $5 a month. It's something that I do on the side. We'll be covering baseball and basketball for about a month or so overlap. And then we'll be baseball summer and then football starts. So it's something I do 3, 4, 5 times a week. It's all linked in my Twitter profile. People could check that out. And, more than anything, check out rotoballer.com because we have a lot of cool we have basketball content. And I'm hoping to, as our basketball editor, build out some more dynasty content. And I just recently took over that position. So I want to try to increase our kind of reach across the basketball space into, dynasty content and NBA draft coverage. And I'm in the process right now of trying to build that out even further. So.
Oh, yeah. Lucky you have so much free time to do all that.
While I'm doing everything else, it's just, we're doing all that too.
Add it to the list. Cool. All right. So that will do it for today's show. Remember, you can check out all of our content, the Dynasty stuff, these podcasts, my player ranks, over at FBIbasketball.com. The Discord server will continue to run all the way through, doesn't stop. You can follow this podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Love it if you could give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel as we continue to build. Until next time, catch up.
You just listened to another episode from the Fantasy Basketball International Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. And for more information about joining our community, please check out our website at fbibasketball.com.